Good evening. Welcome everybody to City Council for January 18th, 2022. Can we please call roll?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Here.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Stein?
Here.
Councilmember Tracy?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Here.
Mayor Smith?
Here. I'd like to call Greg Swearingen to give our invocation. Let's all please rise.
Lord, we're just so grateful for this city. Lord, we just hope and pray that this city would be a light, and we pray that you would bless it. And so we look to you, and we just thank you for this city. And so we ask for wise decisions here. The city council, give them wisdom and direction and discernment. We thank you for all those who put their lives in harm's way for us, to protect us. And so we just ask your rich blessings. In the Lord's name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge I would like to remind those who are in the audience that if you have an item on the agenda that you wish to speak to City Council about, you need to go to that table and fill out a form and turn it into Cindy Foster Owens right here on the corner, and that will give you the opportunity to address City Council. Do we have any citizens request to speak to council on something other than on the agenda? All right, then we'll go to City Council announcements. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind everyone we do have a general government meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, here at 5 o'clock. We're going to be reviewing and discussing market and industry opportunities, a final report.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
I just wanted to announce that Canyon City Tiger Youth Baseball will be doing their annual Doritos Rigatoni Dinner fundraiser, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on February 20th.
Awesome, thank you. Councilmember Tracy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention again, we've talked in the past, or the council before I was on had talked in the past about the Cotter Uranium Mill Community Advisory Group monthly meetings. I'm assuming that the city has not selected a person to be a formal representative to that group and attend those meetings once a month. I would be happy to do that since I already go to those meetings if council and mayor would like me to do that. And if so, I would also like to periodically update the city briefly in regard to what's going on with the regulatory process of the contaminated uranium mill site. And so we just want some feedback at some point from council and mayor staff, whether you would like a brief update at a council meeting from time to time or a written update or maybe both. So just wanted to bring that up. They usually meet the third Tuesdays. They're having a short meeting tonight that I'm missing because I want to be here, so just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Councilmember Tracy. I know that they've asked for a council member to attend those meetings and have a city representative, and I think that's wonderful that you're willing and able to do that. Maybe, Cindy, we can put that on an agenda for an official appointment, if that's okay. And we expect for all of our council members for the various boards to, if we can, get updates. I mean, that's why you're there, to be our representative and keep us updated on what you're doing and what your boards are doing and how we can be a support. So thank you for that. It's now time for our consent agenda. Administrator Stevens, if you're able and willing.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Item 6A is to approve the minutes for January 4th regular city council meeting and the January 5th general government meeting. 6B authorizes the mayor to reappoint Cindy Nordell to a one-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission. 6C authorizes the city administrator to sign an agreement with Tri-State Fireworks for a display on April 2nd in an amount not to exceed $25,000. 6D authorizes the mayor to sign the Humane Society Services Contract for 2022. 6E extends the bid 0121 extension of janitorial services with the Clean Company in an amount not to exceed $87,323.40. 6F awards bid 522 work trucks to Dellenbach Motors in an amount not to exceed $54,112. 6G awards bid 822 the High Head Low Head Pump Station MCC replacement project. That's the additional paperwork that you got before the council meeting. 6H awards bid 1022 tandem dump truck snowplow sander combo to McCandless Truck Center LLC of Aurora, Colorado, and an amount not to exceed $246,152.16. Item 6I awards bid 1122 JCB 3CX compact backhoe to Ron's Equipment Company in an amount not to exceed $64,736.56. 6J awards bid 1222 Bobcat compact excavator E60 to Bobcat of the Rockies in an amount not to exceed $71,557. 6K is the monthly budget summary for October, and 6L is list of bills and the P card list of bills.
Councilmember Tracy?
I have just a brief correction on 6A and then question on 6K. So do we ask to have those removed from the consent agenda, or what's the process that council usually follows on that?
If there's just a slight amendment, then we can just do that when the motion's made. If it's something that we feel like needs to have a lot of discussion, then we would move for it to be put to the regular agenda.
Okay. Should I go
Yeah,
ahead
please.
with, all right. On the minutes, item 6A, I think it's just a typo on page 5, about 3/4 of the way down, regarding bid 1622, amount not to exceed, I believe, 300,000, although there's a couple of periods there, so I wanted to be sure what that's supposed to be. And then my other, on 6K, it was really just a general question to make sure I'm reading the charts correctly. I'm turning pages here to get to the right one. It's in regard to sales tax collections for the general fund and the 2A sales tax collections. This is through October of 2021. It looks, if I'm reading the chart correctly, but correct me if I'm not, it looks as if that our collections generally exceeded what was expected or the budgeted amount in most or all of the months through October for both general fund and 2A. And I just wanted to confirm that I'm reading that correctly.
That is correct. The sales tax collections have been up this year.
Okay. So is that something that was expected or was a pleasant surprise or?
At the beginning of the year, actually last year, City Council staff made a recommendation to move to state collected, and City Council approved that. So we went to state collection, and we're seeing some additional collections from vendors who weren't previously remitting to the city. So that was something that we were expecting to see. But the fact that the sales tax numbers have continued to remain strong during COVID, I think that's a pleasant surprise. But to some extent, it was expected because we have a lot of people who are staying home and buying locally, but not necessarily to this extent. So that's the pleasant surprise.
Great, thanks.
And it really was the result of the Wayfair Act that came to the Supreme Court that allowed sales tax collection on online sales. That really changed things. And it wasn't until we went to the state where they were actually able to effectively collect those online sales. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to, I attend most of the county commissioners' meetings. They see a similar pattern as far as sales tax receipts and collections, and I just thought you'd like to know that.
Councilmember Smisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to commend the city on taking the time to redo 6K, I think it is, or 6G, bid 822. I know it takes more time and more effort to redo things, but redoing this bid saves us approximately $200,000. So I think well worth, and by us, I mean the taxpayers, so well worth the extra time and effort. So just wanted to commend the water department for that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda and agenda. Councilmember Tracy.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, item 6 on.
Second.
And would that be with the
Amendment.
suggested edit?
Yes, thank you, with the suggested edit on the minutes.
So there's been a motion with an amendment and a second. Any discussion? Call vote, please.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher?
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Stein?
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Thank you, council, and thank you, staff. Ryan, would you like to give a city administrator's report?
Absolutely. You have the written reports in your packets. Couple of, well, actually, one thing that's not in there, hiring for certain positions has still been a struggle for the city. We've had the Main Street Program Manager position out there twice. It closes today. So far, we're still, pretty light as far as applications go. So one of the things that we discussed, I discussed with the mayor is possibly putting a contract event manager position in place for a little bit to help assist with some of the 150th festivities in place of that Main Street position for a little bit. So we're evaluating that and putting together that's what that might look like. And then Councilwoman Schmisher asked me to touch on the refueling station, the City Market refueling station that's going on at 15th and East Main Street. So that has been approved. I believe they are in the middle of their real estate transaction or closing up their real estate transaction. We are expecting that they will be submitting for a demo permit, if they haven't already, to start demolition of the old Holiday Motel there on the corner. And that project will continue to move forward. We did work through CDOT's as far as some of those access concerns are concerned, and it will be going to a one access point only off of East Main Street. So the access points that comes off of 15th will go away. So that development is underway as well. And then the last thing, you have the building reports in your packets. There's $62 million, over $62 million of valuation that was added to the city through new construction and renovations this past year, as well as 48 new single-family residents. So it was a big year for the building department. They were busy running all over town doing those inspections and getting those buildings open. And some of that will continue through this year, and just wait to see how things shape up from the building's standpoint through this year. Happy to take any questions the council might have.
Councilmember Reed.
Ryan, for the event manager position, was that something that you were looking at maybe hiring on to staff, or is that something that you're looking to bid out and like contract?
It'd be a contract
Okay.
position. Yep.
That's what I was
Yeah,
hoping.
just a temporary position to get us through the 150th anniversary celebrations.
Well, that's exciting. So will that go through like an RFP process, or how does that work?
We'll put together a scope of work, and then I still don't know how we're going to put it out there yet. But
That's exciting. There's a lot of local talent that I'm sure will be hopefully interested in that.
I think so.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
And I just have a comment about that particular subject. I'd just like to point out that we did have a Main Street program manager who was shouldering a lot of the responsibilities for the 150th, as well as other things. And when that person left the city, That fell on our mayor, who's been doing yeoman's work there, carrying forward, essentially having two full-time jobs, both as mayor and as program manager for the 150th and other activities also. And so this is really to kind of help give our mayor a break here rather than having her double up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. Councilmember Stein.
I just had one question for Ryan. You were talking about the development of that little piece of land for City Market's gas station. And I was just wondering, are they going to be looking for another liquor license? Or will they extend their own for that, for beer sales or anything?
No, this is it's just a kiosk, so there's, it's basically a cashier register.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Ryan? All right, thank you so much for that report. We're now going to move on to item 8A, and that's introduction and adoption by title only of Resolution 2, Series of 2022, entitled A Resolution of the City of Canyon City, Colorado, establishing fees related to police department services related to dog licensing.
So earlier this year, late last year, City Council made some changes to our dog ordinance. The fees for that ordinance actually need to be changed by resolution, so this is the resolution updating those fees and adding the fee for the dangerous dog to the fee schedule. And we have Chief Schick here to answer any questions, if there are any.
Chief, do you want to address council before we start opening up to questions?
Madam Mayor, members of council, how are you this evening?
Fine.
As Ryan indicated, we're just trying to update the schedule. We did not see a need to raise the rate beyond for the dangerous dog license, beyond what we had for the unaltered animal license. Those figures, so far this year, or last year, we had 65 licenses issued, and we only had one for unaltered animals. So we don't anticipate too much from this, but we certainly didn't want to raise any fees until we had data that suggested it was necessary to cover our employee cost and anything else that we have in there.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess this just goes as an opinion here because as a dog owner and as a dog breeder, once in a while, I guess I have a problem with the different discrepancy between and it's only $10, but it's still a discrepancy between an altered dog and an unaltered dog. And I think that also penalizes people who are responsible dog breeders. And there's a lot of them. We do have people who are not responsible, but personally, I think that the dog licensing should be one price for the dog, and that's it. And I think that in town, we have some absolutely very responsible people with their dogs, and that's just my opinion, and that's the way I would like to see it.
Councilmember Reed.
I just needed a clarification, because I don't recall there being a difference for altered and unaltered dog in the original ordinance. I probably maybe just missed it. Is that how it was written before? Or is this fee schedule different between those two? Because my understanding was when we were talking about it last time that we were just looking at the dangerous dog fee
It's the same.
changing. So that's what it was before.
The only thing that's different is adding a dangerous dog
Perfect.
license.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tracy.
I wanted to be sure I was clear. I thought that I read in the memo that the license for altered and unaltered animals is for every other year, but that the dangerous dog license is for every year. Is that correct? And if so, should we specify those timeframes in the resolution?
Chief, would you like to address council on that?
Yeah, looking at the memo, I believe that's the way the ordinance was originally written, but I believe now it's going to read that it's every 2 years regardless of when it was purchased, and adds a separate dangerous dog license valid for 1 year from purchase.
So the time frame is from purchase. So whenever you purchase it, it's good
purchase.
for 1 year.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And the time frame is already in the ordinance, I think, to respond to Councilmember
Okay.
Tracy's question.
Those current ones are
Yes,
still
ma'am.
there. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hear what you're saying there, Tim, although we're not making a change to what we have had. But we are adding the fee for license requirements for a dangerous dog. And it seems to me that in the case of a dangerous dog, we are not just trying to recover fees for expenses the city may incur in managing this program, but we're actually trying to discourage people from maintaining pets that are in that category. And seeing no further request to speak to council, I would make a motion that we approve Resolution Number 2, Series of 2022, with the provision that the dangerous dog license be increased to $40.
To $40 instead of the $22.50? There's been a motion. If you wish to second it, you can, or it will die. If you second it, we would have an opportunity to discuss it and vote on it, which it could also die at that moment too, or pass. Councilmember Stein.
Do we have, is part of the ordinance, Chief Schick, a description? How do we determine it? Is there just categories for dangerous dogs automatically?
It's outlined in the ordinance, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's not defined by breed, if that's what you're asking. It is typically something that's court-ordered, being a description of dangerous dog. Is that?
Correct.
So there's been an action?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Corey, could you look up the ordinance that City Council recently passed about dangerous dogs and just kind of give a brief overview for the benefit of the audience and the public?
I did not bring my laptop to the meeting. I could certainly,
Or Chief Schick, do you have access to that? Unfortunately, it wasn't put into our binders to have that.
I mean, but it is generally things like a dog bite, either of a human or another animal. There's a whole host of instances where a court could deem a dog to be a dangerous animal based on actual conduct that's charged into our municipal court.
So it's not a dangerous dog until it has gone to the municipal court for pretty severe actions.
That is correct, and what the city administrator said cannot be emphasized enough. This has nothing to do with breed. It could be a dangerous Chihuahua.
So for the benefit of the audience, this came about because of a dog in a neighborhood that had frequent calls to the police for vicious behavior. And there was nothing in the code that could do anything to enforce any sort of action by the owner to be more responsible, to keep the dog within its property, within the fencing. And that dog ended up getting out again, and it killed a neighbor's dog. And so at that time, there was a request, and it has passed city council already, that when something that severe happens with the pet, that there is something that the municipal court can do to help regulate dogs that are that dangerous. For the benefit of the public, that ordinance was that no person, firm, or corporation shall own, keep, harbor, or possess any noisy, destructive, or vicious dog, or any dog which is not registered in accordance with this chapter. Noisy dogs and vicious or destructive dogs shall be deemed nuisances. Upon a complaint made to the animal control officer as to any such dog, the animal control officer shall investigate the truth of the complaint, and if he or she shall find it sustained, shall file in the municipal court a complaint charging violation of this section by the owner of such dog. If such owner shall be found guilty of the offense charged in such complaint, the dog as to which such complaint shall be made shall be conclusively proved to be a noisy, vicious, or destructive dog, as the case may be, for all purposes under this chapter. We also consulted the Humane Society for some professional guidance in this. Worked with our police chief also on certain instances that we've had with destructive dogs, and took it very seriously. And we recognize that this could cause quite a bit of extra work on the behalf of our police officers, and hence this is just another way to address these extreme cases. Councilmember Reed.
I'd like to go ahead and second Mayor Pro Tem's motion so that we can hear further discussion, understanding that we'll all be able to vote afterwards. So I'm curious to hear what he has to say, so I will second that motion.
Okay. And so just for clarification, we can have discussion on this motion now. If it does not pass, there is an opportunity to have another motion made if needed. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my thinking on this was that we basically have dogs, we have vicious dogs, and we have dangerous dogs. 3 levels within our code now. And that when a dog is adjudicated to be a dangerous dog, that is almost a danger to public health and safety by itself. And because of that, I think that it is appropriate to place a little more emphasis on, and this is not a dog that's been declared a vicious dog, that doesn't apply there, but the next level up, a dangerous dog. And I just felt that it was appropriate to emphasize that point through our code, that dangerous dogs are right on the edge of being real threats to the public.
Councilmember Stein. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Councilmember Tracy. Sorry, we still have the old council member names on here, so I have to use extra thinking.
Dolly, are you out there? Oh, there.
Yeah, I could call on you, Dolly, at any time.
I think Councilmember Hamrick partly answered my question in terms of, and I should have reviewed the ordinance, and I did not before tonight, although I did read it when it was passed several months ago. So I understand now from what Councilmember Hamrick has said that dangerous is kind of that highest level. But I guess my other thought is charging a lot for a license is not necessarily going to solve the problem. And do we need to consider maybe something else, some other kind of remedy with a future change to this ordinance? So it's just a question that I have.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I have 2 thoughts that I'd like to share. One, I think that we do, within this license fee update, do place an emphasis that there, is an issue or a concern that's been adjudicated, because in addition to the fee for either having an unaltered or an altered animal, it's an additional fee already on top of that. I, for one, really appreciated Chief Schick's comments about waiting to see if it does have an increased cost burden on our police department. These particular dogs, the licensing of them, and then also the work that our animal control officers may or may not have to do with regard to their ongoing issues that may come about from having a dangerous dog. So I could definitely see revisiting this in 6 months or 12 months once we have that data to see whether or not there is an increase in cost that's borne to our police department. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Schmischer. I was feeling the same. They already are paying an increased fee, and it's once a year instead of every other year. And let's wait and see the data. I don't want to go too far in the other direction until we know a little bit more on what we're dealing with. Is there any other discussion by the City Council? I'll call a vote, please.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Nay.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Nay.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Nay.
Councilmember Stein.
Nay.
Councilmember Tracy.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
So this motion has failed 5-2. I would like to entertain a new motion. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Mayor and Council, I move to approve Resolution Number 2, Series of 2022 as written.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. That's a good sport. There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Nay.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Thank you, council. The motion does pass, and thank you, Chief Schick and staff as well. And we've now moved on to item 8B, introduction and first reading by title only of Ordinance 1, Series of 2022, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending Chapter 9.52 of the Canyon City Municipal Code relating to the carrying of weapons into city buildings. Ryan Stevens?
Madam Mayor, members of council, you have an ordinance in front of you regarding putting, regarding the allowing of firearms to be carried in city buildings for concealed carry or permitted users only, or, and then banning the use or carrying of firearms in the police department altogether, with the exception of sworn officers. There were some changes to some of the gun control laws, was it last year, last legislature? Yep. And this ordinance is in part to help bring us in confirmation with some of those changes at the state level as well. Chief Schick is on the phone to both discuss Ordinance 1 and Ordinance 2 as well.
And Mayor, if I could, just before the chief.
Absolutely.
I want to just clarify one thing. What happened during the 2021 legislative session is that in response to some of the issues across the state, the legislature gave more authority to the city. The city doesn't have to exercise that, so I want to make that clear. There's no obligation to do anything, and that this ordinance, as indicated in the cover memo, only prohibits the weapons in the police department as it relates to both concealed carry and open carry, and then prohibits open carrying on certain designated city properties as well.
Thank you. Chief?
Madam Mayor, members of council, the ordinance before you, the amendments, it comes down to safety for me and your police department. Your will is to extend concealed carry privileges to individuals in the city buildings, and we certainly support you in that endeavor. However, we as an industry standard would ask that we continue to be able to prohibit those weapons from being carried into the police departments. And I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So that I have it clear in my mind, what this ordinance does is it allows us to pass further ordinances or regulations that would prohibit the carry of weapons into a particular building or area.
That is only as to open carry. If you look at subsection D, and yes, in subsection C, it prohibits the carrying of concealed carry weapons if such prohibitions have been posted in and around such places and areas, and limits the fine to $50, which is consistent with state law. So state law gave this authority, but said the fine can't be any more than $50. And then,
So-
and then it prohibits altogether weapons in the police department other than sworn officers.
So so what I believe I'm reading is that it says that the city council may, if this ordinance is passed, prohibit firearms in certain areas, depending whether it's concealed or open carry, but only after an ordinance is passed and a sign is posted.
That is correct.
As it is, this changes nothing right at this point.
Correct, other than the police department.
And if city council wanted at some point to prohibit the carrying of a firearm, whether open or concealed, at some later date, without this ordinance, would the city council be able to do that?
No, and there are certain constraints even in the future in terms of the city's ability to do so. There are plenty of areas where folks are allowed to carry weapons and the city can't regulate.
Can you give examples?
In your car, for example, is a good example, and there's many others.
Councilmember Tracy.
My question is just in regard to the wording on Section 2, A and B. If I understand correctly, it would prohibit open and concealed carry in the police department. And if I'm correct on that, then I'm a little unclear as to why we have the wording in Section B. Maybe I just need a little clarification. If it's illegal, why do we need the language in B? Or
Great.
is that just to make it clear about the penalty?
Great question, and it is because the penalty is limited by state law, so we have to identify that the penalty is not the normal penalty for a violation of ordinance, but is limited to the $50 under the new legislation. So that is a great question.
Thanks.
Councilmember Reed.
So I have two clarifying questions first. I guess one of the things that I'm unclear on is in Section 1, in Part D. Corey, could you just kind of go through that and maybe break it down for me, what exactly you're meaning? Because when it says nothing in this section shall be deemed to permit the open carrying of firearms into or within specific places, and then it starts to list, parks and trails and all of those. Just, would you mind breaking that down for me further?
Certainly, there are certain types of places under state law, and it references 2911.7-104, where the city could, by separate ordinance, prohibit open carrying of weapons. And so this simply includes that language.
And another question that I have is why was the decision made to, in one ordinance, include the police department as well as the ability for the city to prohibit open carrying in other city buildings? Could that not have been separated into two separate ordinances?
It certainly could have. This was implementing the new legislation as directed by City Council, but you could either split this up, you could approve part of it, someone could make a motion, for example, approving Section 2 only, so you still have the ability either to table it and ask for them to be split up or address it piecemeal if you wish.
Perfect. Then I do have a few remarks, if I may, Madam Mayor. I appreciate that the 2021 Colorado legislature has given as remarks. However, this is a constitutional issue, and I do not believe that we should be in any way creating law that is prohibiting open carry in city buildings or anywhere else. I do understand the need for the police department. I respect our police chief and would be willing to entertain that as a separate ordinance. But whether or not we are changing ordinance tonight and putting in place parameters for prohibiting open carry, or we are setting the stage for prohibiting open carry later on, I'm adamantly opposed, and I do believe that we are giving opportunity to set a stage for something that, as a community and as a county, we have stood for. And so I would ask that council really consider Fremont County, Canyon City, rural Colorado, and the community that we are representing up here. I do not feel that the intent of this ordinance is reflective of the constituents that have elected us.
Please, no applause. Just so you know, this is not a town hall meeting. This is an official meeting of city council, and there will be no applause or calling out during our proceedings. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask one further question. I think I asked my question perhaps a little bit inexactly before, but is this council's only opportunity to act under the recently passed state legislation? Or could this council at some future date or another council revisit this ordinance if it was appropriate?
It can always be revisited. All that the legislature did is give limited local authority.
Thank you.
So I have a clarifying question, Corey. Again, on section 1D, where it said that that was just to give us the opportunity in the future to prohibit if we wished. But the way it reads, it sounds like it is prohibiting it now, if it was to be passed. I wonder if there needs some more clarification.
It references other city ordinances, specifically, in the middle of subsection D, where city ordinances or other regulations of the city prohibit firearms and signage advising the public of such prohibition has been posted. So it needs something else other than this language.
So you would have to have signage or prohibitions. It still is really confusing to read it.
And look, I would agree that the way that weapons legislation in the state of Colorado has evolved has become incredibly confusing because the legislature has changed many times over the years in terms of who has the authority to approve and take away the rights of folks to carry weapons. And so this was, frankly, a response to the shooting, the King Soopers shooting in Boulder. That said, we as the state legislature we're going to punt, but we are going to give local municipalities the authority to legislate on a limited basis. And so that's what this is doing, is based on your direction, creating very limited areas where the city can, in the future, legislate, and tonight, if adopted, chooses to legislate as it relates to the police department.
Giving us that choice and not the state, in a way.
Correct, and as to the police department, it would actually be affirmatively making that decision tonight if this ordinance were adopted.
So can we have open carry in our parks and open spaces currently?
Unless there is legislation either at the state level or the local government decides to, then yes.
So there is currently open carry in our parks and open spaces.
Unless the city has an ordinance, and I have not looked at all the ordinances to see what's in effect today, but I don't
Okay.
believe there's a prohibition
And so for
today.
further clarification before we go to comments from those in the audience, is that there are currently signs on the outside of City Hall that say no.
No, those have been removed. Madam
No, there's
Mayor.
one, I just saw one today.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Upstairs?
They should have been removed because the signage, as we discovered, was erected without an ordinance of the city a number of years ago, and that was improper. And I
So
want to,
The
some-
sign at the back door was removed? Is that correct? There was a sign at the back door.
I just know I went to the front door today, and it is there, and for the benefit of the public, under previous administration, the sign was put up there prohibiting guns, and that, there was no ordinance by the city council to allow that to happen. And so the city council had a discussion at a retreat that they would like to revisit either sustaining that or at least allowing concealed carry, and or perhaps open carry. And at that point, the conversation was perhaps in City Hall itself, a concealed carry would be the most prudent way to move forward for the protection of all. With that said, we're going to go ahead and open up to the audience based on if you filled out a request to speak to council. If you still wish to speak to council, please fill out your form and give it to Cindy Foster Owens. I will read them according to how they were received, and we will start with Sean Maher.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council, for allowing us to speak. Thank you for those who have all took time to support in opposition to these two ordinances that are before council today.
Sean, just really quick, sorry to interrupt you, but you do have a green light that gives you 3 minutes, a yellow light with 30 seconds left, and then red light when your time is done. We will do that consistently for fairness of all who are speaking, that they all have equal opportunity to speak.
Okay. I don't know if I'll need 3 minutes, but can I get a reset then?
You are.
You have a reset.
Okay, reset. Thank you. I just want to start off by saying that I agree with Councilwoman Reed that, and I think many of us do, that this is a constitutional issue. And what we've seen take place over many years leading up to now is an infringement and a subtle movement or attack against Second Amendment rights. And many of us feel that this opens the door for that. And we're very hesitant to see the City Council begin to move forward and place ordinances in our public spaces that would prohibit open carry, as is outlined within this ordinance. I will say this, I do completely agree with Councilwoman Reed in regards to support of our police chief in some kind of restrictions there in the police department. I respect him and serve under him as well. But on the second part of that ordinance, there needs to be some kind of delineation so that there can be some distinctions made, and not just using that as an open door to then make additional regulations against gun owners and those who desire to protect their family. One of the things that we know about open carry, those of us who decide to do so and choose to do so, is because we have been taught, and I've been trained in certain instances, that prevention is and deterrent is your number one prevention when it comes to safety. And when you are in a public space and you are open carrying, you are a deterrent to those who want to do you harm or do others harm around you. And you can de-escalate a situation before there's even anything escalated in that situation. We've seen over and over again when we've seen these mass shootings take place, they've taken place because these people are cowards in places where guns have been prohibited. And when we move that direction and continue to move that direction, even ever so slightly, in these kinds of ways that we see going on proposed as of today, it's an attack on that. It's an attack on our citizens' rights here to be able to defend our families when we are in public spaces or when we are in gatherings. I know the second ordinance specifically deals with public spaces that the city owns in regards to events. I think, for instance, of the Whitewater Festival, and when we're down there in that, I would like the privilege, as the law already states, to carry that in case of an incident was to arise. We have a wonderful police department, we have a wonderful sheriff's department, but we know that it takes a little bit to respond to these things. And if there's an active shooter in that situation, we've seen over and over and over again that the one that deters that, the one that stops that, is the normal citizen who has been trained and knows how to handle a weapon in there. We've seen instances already with the homeless situation increasing here in our community. We know that they struggle with mental illness and drug addiction, and there's threats there. And also, I would like to bring to note the recent attack on the Riverwalk with the women in our community, and my time's up. Thank you.
I would like to clarify that we are talking about just right now on this ordinance 8B, concealed carry for City Hall, but maintaining open carry for open spaces, which would include the Riverwalk. The next ordinance C will talk about events, and that is two separate issues. Something to keep in mind when you think about the events is that the introduction of an event that has alcohol in it. And so that changes the story of gun use with the addition of alcohol use, just for that future reference. Will Cullen, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. I would, to not waste time, I would definitely like to echo everything this gentleman just said in front of me, and of course, what Councilwoman Reed said. I'd like to echo that. I'd also like to remind council that a couple things. First off, Canyon City's not Denver or Boulder, nor do we ever want to be. That was brought up. The reason that some of these laws are starting to come down this way, I just want to remind you guys of that. I also kind of get the feeling from what I've heard is that something that might be what's going on here is trying to put teeth behind the signs that are posted currently when we
No,
walk through
it's to
these
take
doors.
those teeth away.
You're right, and I would
Yeah.
like to see those teeth taken away. I know those signs were put up probably not in the right way, and I'd hate to see you guys going about this just to put teeth behind the signs. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Also, I think this does open up, as Sean said, for further restrictions on our Second Amendment rights. Something that really concerns me is Canyon City is very unique. Mandy mentioned many of these reasons, but I want to remind the council that we're unique in the way that we have 3 very large parks: Temple Canyon Park, Red Canyon Park, and the Royal Gorge Bridge and Park, or I should say Royal Gorge Park. Those are all city parks. In order to hunt BLM land around it, you would may have to go through those parks. And I know currently that's not the concern, but I would hate to see this go down the road to where those places are limited for carrying guns open or concealed, either one. I don't see any difference personally. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Lisa Himes.
Good evening, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Lisa Himes, and thank you, Councilwoman Reed, for your comments, as well as the comments that have preceded me. I have a few notes, if you'll give me a second here. First of all, if someone is going to come in and cause mayhem, they are going to have a concealed weapon. They're not going to have it out for you to see. It's going to be hidden. And if you have no one else there in your room, whether it be in the lobby up here or even down here in chambers, and no one else has a concealed carry on them, you're going to thank God that there's an open carry person down there to take out that person who is going to cause harm. I do believe that open carry deters crimes from being committed. That being said, also reiterating that we're not Boulder, and also stating that we all want to see everyone protected. We also respect the police departments and their right, and I would not carry into a police department, understanding their concern should I walk in. I think that comes with common sense. But don't think that because someone open carries, they're not trained. I heard a comment somewhere that, well, if you have a concealed carry permit, we know you're trained. Well, most people that open carry have also been trained in when and how. And I don't want to make them less because they open carry and they don't conceal carry. I also would like to remind everyone that we are Fremont County. We do vote more than 70% to protect our Second Amendment rights, and that the City Council represents the people of Fremont County. And I do believe that they have a safety concern, but if you have people in open carry in your City Council building, they are protecting you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Commissioner Grantham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. I guess to get right at it, why this? I mean, what prompts this? I mean, besides 2021 legislation at the state that's enabling legislation, you have no reason to bring this. You don't have to pass this. You don't have to even entertain the idea of these things. There's no event that precipitated this. Are we trying to pass local law to prevent some phantom event that hasn't happened yet, that it hasn't been, there's been no precursor of? None of this warrants such proposals. We hear about safety, we hear about security, and I've heard this 1,000 times over in my time. Quite simply, this body, no body of legislators or council members or congressmen or senators can give any citizen the safety and security they think they deserve. But they can, you as a body can protect and guard freedoms and liberties. And these do not do that. Safety and security cannot be given by removing the individual's ability to protect themselves. That is taking away security and safety. Safety and security is not a guarantee, and shockingly enough, is not even a right. But my Second Amendment rights are a right. Ask yourself, does passing either of these, and we're talking about the first one obviously right now, does passing this one protect the citizens' freedom to defend themselves, or does it chip away at their ability to do it? I think it's pretty clear that it's the latter. This chips away at their ability to protect themselves and their own safety and security. A right exercised today with open carry will be illegal tomorrow if these things pass. Now, no real security will be gained, but a freedom will be denied and deprived. The state has given you the ability to pass such things. Do not exercise it. You don't have to exercise this. Just because the state says you can doesn't mean you have to. My neighbors, my councilmen, my friends out here, anyone, not even the police chief, none of their desire, none of your desire to feel more secure does not trump my right to make myself secure. Legislation that is passed in Denver does not have to trickle down to us here in Canyon City. Thank you.
Do you
Yes,
have a question for Commissioner? Commissioner, we have a question for you by Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
So I did not hear you address it directly, and perhaps you could let us know what your thinking is on the section 2 of ordinance 1, which is the prohibition on concealed or open carry within the police department building.
Is that in ordinance 1 or ordinance 2?
That's in ordinance 1, and it says it is unlawful for any person, including city employees, to carry a firearm or weapon on or about his person into the police department.
Okay.
And I just would like to hear your thinking on that.
If the idea is safety and security, I can think of no place more safe and secure than a place that is full of police officers carrying. And so the fact that it is used as, and is propped up there as this excuse for prohibiting a citizen's right to carry in the very place that should be the most secure in Canyon City already, it fails the sniff test. Any one of us, including every one of you, should have the ability to defend themselves and have the ability not to defend themselves. No one's forcing anyone to open carry, but this does force people not to open carry. And that is the law of the state of Colorado. And as far as the alcohol excuse, if I might, that's already against the law to carry and consume alcohol. That's been the law for a long time. So using that as an excuse to prohibit this at events also does not meet the sniff test. Ask yourself this: does this give or take away, whether it's a tiny bit in your mind or a lot? Does it give or does it take away someone's right to exercise their Second Amendment rights?
Thank you.
Randall Hunsaker. You're going to defer? Bridger Langston.
How you guys doing tonight? So, my only concern is with this whole thing is it kind of goes back to catch-22, like basic common knowledge. You go to a police station, and you're going in there fighting and kicking and fussing, obviously something's gonna happen, right? Well, if you have a gun on your hip, obviously you're probably gonna get shot. So why would you wanna do that in the first place? Number two, it just goes back to, my son's 12 years old. I teach him everything you have to know about gun safety, because I wanna know if, I mean, God forbid something did happen in our town, I wanna know that I'm safe. Let's say I take a bullet. My son's sitting there, or another kid's sitting there, I want to know that my son's going to know what to do. So therefore, if you guys start making all the rules to where we can't have our guns in Sitch, I mean, people are going to do it anyways. It's kind of like going back to the whole, we were in here before about the side-by-sides and that. People continued to ride those. People are going to continue to carry. We're not Denver, we're not the bigger cities, but have you guys ever thought of why a mass shooting has not happened in Westcliff, Salida, Canyon? It's because of all those people out here that carry. We respect you guys, so respect our rights and your rights. In my opinion, that's just plain as it can be. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I open up to comments from council, Chief and Corey, I'd like to give you an opportunity to revisit Section 2 of this ordinance about the justification for or not for carrying a firearm within the CCPD. Chief, we'll start with you.
Madam Mayor. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Madam Mayor, members of council, I could not agree more with everything that has been said here this evening. I will take a little issue with citizens bringing firearms into the police department. And only in such that oftentimes when folks come into our building, it's adversarial in nature, and we would like to have the right to inspect who's coming in, their backpacks, their purses, their person, to make sure that they're not armed when we're getting ready to investigate them or arrest them. Things of that nature. And if we don't have an ordinance authorizing that, and it's allowed across the board to open carry or concealed carry in every city building, then my folks lose that ability.
And we also have a municipal court in the same building, and just for reference, the
Yes, ma'am.
county court does have security there that does not allow firearms or weapons within their court building.
Certainly an industry standard. Yes, ma'am.
Corey, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I don't. I was obligated, I think, to tell you what your options were under the new legislation, so I provided you those options. It is council's prerogative, however it chooses to address these draft ordinances that I was asked to draft.
So also, before we open up to comments from council, just a reminder that this ordinance, number one, it was brought here partly for state and partly maybe for us to give a message that we can decide as a city how and what we want to decide for our Second Amendment rights. And we're not that, we want the state to know that that's for us to decide. Number two, there were signs that were illegally put on the city hall building prohibiting guns, and we felt that to take those signs off, we probably should have an open public discussion to do that. That's why we're here today. Number three, there's some things we can do. If the council wishes, they can pass it as is, or they can amend it where we only pass Section 2 and just leave everything else as is. Another thing, if that were to happen, if the council wished, we could give us direction to also have more conversations if desired. If we only pass Section 2, then we will go back. Corey, would that be right? If we only pass Section 2, then it would just be back to open carry. There's no rules whatsoever about hand.
Correct. So if council desired to only address the police department, you would want to delete the first whereas clause. And then delete Section 1 in its entirety. and then the ordinance would simply have 2, 3, and 4, and 3 is simply the severability clause, and 4 is the effective date.
Okay. Thank you for that guidance. We'll start by hearing from Councilmember Smith.
I actually pushed my button a long time ago, so.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. I don't have anything to say.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you. I also pushed mine a while ago, but I do have
Okay.
a clarifying question. And so we heard from Chief Schick that he feels that if this ordinance is passed, that will give police officers the right to inspect backpacks and purses of people that enter into the police department. Was that indeed the case?
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Tracy.
2 or 3 comments. One of them is just a minor wording comment on both ordinance 1 and 2. Looks like it should say series of 2022. So just wording there. I do want to thank everyone for your comments. And, you know, we don't all agree on this issue, but really particularly appreciate the comments from those of you, which is probably all of you, who have gone through training so that you know how to use firearms, and hopefully you keep your skills up and all of those things that firearm users and carriers should do. So I just want to express appreciation about that because it's such an important piece of all this. I frankly do support the ordinance as written, and would just like to say again that it does not apply. And the mention earlier about a shooting at King Soopers, and maybe that was related to the state legislation, it's not related to this. This ordinance only applies to the carrying of weapons in city buildings and in the city police department. So I just think, I hugely admire our chief and take his advice on what's appropriate in a police department. I worked in one for a couple of years, and I'm aware of what a lobby at a police department can be like at some times. So I think that's all that I wanted to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for those who spoke tonight. You know, we have a lot of information here. This is a controversial matter as it is nationwide. Chief Schick, I have nothing but respect for you and the things that you've already done for our city in that. But this is one time when that I'm going to have to say I agree with some of the comments from Mr. Grantham. This is a Second Amendment right. Our police department does a fantastic job here. But if somebody, as we know, wants to take their gun in and cause problems, they're going to do that. I don't think that restricting people from carrying weapons in any manner is going to do anything to resolve any of the potential firearms problems that we have. And as my recommendation to council, I personally am against both ordinances on this. Thank you.
For myself, I am perfectly fine if we delete the first clause and delete the section 1 for open carry within City Hall. However, I do have stronger feelings for section 2 within the police department because it is adversarial in nature. If somebody did want to come into the police department with a concealed carry, they can do that at any time whatsoever. However, if there is an arrest or a need for an investigation or coming into the court and there's a need to inspect bags, under those situations, it's important for the safety of our officers and for those who are working in that building to ensure the safety for that investigation and all that is happening under those situations that can be highly adversarial and incredibly tense. It's standard among most buildings, especially where there's a court situation as well. And so I would probably recommend an amendment to move this forward, but I cannot make that motion. I'll leave that up to the council to debate and decide based upon your discussion and your feelings. I do see that Councilmember Reed, you have something?
I have a question. Is there another way to go about giving chief and the police department the ability to search for weapons other than this ordinance?
There's not.
This
This
is the only
would-
way that he has a right to be able to.
This would give them the legal basis to do so, because otherwise they would be allowed to be there. There would be no reason to search.
So, at the county courts, there's a metal detector and security. So I know that this isn't set up the same way at the county, so I guess my question is, like, is there another way to go about this? Like, do we have an option to set up security and get a metal detector, so we just know that without this ordinance?
You would still need the ordinance, because otherwise, if you had a metal detector, it would tell you they had a gun, but it's authorized.
Gotcha.
And really, that's even more teeth, because you're actually actively enforcing it.
Well, I'm
where-
thinking from the court scenario more so, because if someone is showing up to court or they've been arrested, they've broken the law. So I'm just trying to separate out, I guess, and try to understand
Well, the people in the
people
audience.
who've broken the law versus the people who are law-abiding
The
citizens.
people who are attending those court hearings, they haven't broken the law.
Gotcha.
They're attending the court hearings, but it's also adversarial. We would have, if we had the detectors, that means we'd also have to hire officers to security to man those at the same time, and we don't have
Well, I would
those.
rather hire people than take away rights, but I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that appropriately. So thank you for the clarification.
Councilmember Smith.
And my question was just to Chief Schick about the undertaking of having to set up metal detectors and having to hire more staff, and we're already in a staffing issue, correct?
Yes, sir. It would be it would certainly be a staffing issue for us. We're still, as hard as we're working at filling all those vacancies, we're still down 3 officers. So, adding another layer of security within the municipal courts would require personnel and certainly other resources to do that.
Thank you.
I'm really seeing the enforcement of this ordinance being if there's an investigation, if there's an arrest or things like that. I don't see us enforcing this actively unless under these situations. And just for the record too, for being down those police officers, these are not hiring police officers so we can have necessarily lots of traffic stops or giving out tickets. This is to actually go to 911 calls in emergency situations. A lot of those are homeless situations or others that are life-threatening things that we need these police officers for. Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to ask Chief Schick to clarify how he does see enforcing it.
That's a good question.
Enforcing
Were it to
the
pass,
ordinance?
Were Section 2 of this ordinance to pass, how would you go about enforcing it? Thank you.
Well, everybody who came into the police department would be, of course, they would be confronted with signage that talked about the restrictions, and then we'd ask folks, are you carrying a weapon, and if so, can we ask you to take that back out and put it in your trunk and secure it and get it when you go back out?
Is there any further discussion from the council?
May I follow up on that?
Yes.
Chief, just out of curiosity, and I just heard what you said in Councilmember Schmisser's question there, but follow up on that. I mean, we're going to ask them if they have anything, but a lot of people carry, and it's very concealed. So unless there's a detector or something so really there's no way of saying that somebody's carrying this unless they're personally, inspected, hands on them. Am I correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So you're not, Chief, you're not going to be frisking every single person who comes through the doors. I'm assuming the frisking would only happen for those that are under investigation.
Situational. Yes, ma'am. It's situational.
Or you're bringing in someone who's been arrested. Those are the
Well,
situations.
absolutely, they
Tell
should
me the
be-
situations.
They
Tell me the
absolutely should be
situations.
searched before they get in. But the situational aspect is, right, we interview and deal with folks all the time that are not under custody, but they are certainly a matter of a subject or a person of interest in the investigation. And we're going into sensitive areas within the department. And when we go into interview rooms, for example, we secure our weapons. So we don't want to not have our weapon and have somebody in the interview room with a weapon. So if it's, that's when I say it's situational. If you're a witness per se, we may not pat you down. But if you're a suspect in a matter, then we very well may. Just to make sure that we're going in, when we go into those secure areas in the police department, those sensitive areas where a police officer may not be armed, we want to make sure that we're on the same footing.
May I follow up on my question, Madam Mayor?
Let's go to Corey first, and then Councilmember Schmisher.
And I guess one clarification, there are other constitutional rights at issue here. So you can't search without a reason. And I want to make sure that that is abundantly clear, so that when the chief says you're not going to search everybody that comes in, absolutely, you can't. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So there's going to have to be something that triggers reasonable suspicion, whether it is someone acting erratic with a backpack that might have a shape that looks like it could be a weapon. I mean, there's a whole host of things that could trigger the possibility of needing to search for weapons. Chief has talked about taking them back. A person of interest that may not rise to a suspect, but that there is a concern, and the police officer secures their weapon, but the individual may not have their weapon secured if they were carrying without this ordinance. So there's a whole host of examples where this could be utilized, but I would anticipate if council wanted to restrict the ability of individuals coming into the police department from having weapons other than sworn police officers, the police department is still obligated to follow the Fourth Amendment. And so those protections don't go away.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you. So Chief Schick, what do you currently do? If you are currently having individuals who come in who are persons of interest in an investigation, who you need to take into a room where the officers do not have their weapons, but without this ordinance, you are unable to ensure that they do not, that person of interest doesn't have a weapon. What's your current practice? Thanks.
Consent. Consensual pat downs, just talking to them, making sure they don't have any weapons, and we go from there. It was like Corey indicated, there's Fourth Amendment restrictions, and we want to make sure that we respect everybody's constitutional rights. So that's where we're at right now. The situation involved it was following our officer-involved shooting, and had concerns. I wanted to talk with a subject about that incident, and I personally was a little concerned, how this meeting was unwinding, and I wondered, should I ask for a consent search? Is there any provision that would allow me to search them? And so, not having the ability, certainly, and it doesn't really give the officers footing to reject speaking with someone. If they don't want to consent to having their bag searched and assuring us that they don't have a weapon. So it's a little tenuous.
How often, Chief, when you have someone who is under investigation, like that situation with the officer-involved shooting, that they are under the influence of drugs or alcohol? I'd be remiss to say that number was very high. Usually those people, if they're under the influence, are already in custody. So the folks coming into the PD in that posture usually are not under the influence. Thank you. Councilmember Reed.
I just have another question. Is it industry standard, because I don't know, when you're interviewing someone to put your weapon away, is that how it is everywhere? Is that like a Canyon City Police Department policy? Or can you explain that a little bit further? Because I just don't understand the reason behind that.
Yes, ma'am. And that is pretty much an industry standard. In fact, I've seen accreditation standards to that effect. Generally, you have, just like going into a jail, you have gun boxes that you can lock your weapon into. And that's what we recommend folks do, is lock their weapons either in their desk or in a lockbox outside the interview room, to not carry it in that interview room, because as we said earlier, oftentimes those situations are adversarial and they do get tense. So the last thing we want when folks are emotionally charged is to have access to a weapon, even if that weapon is on the side of a police officer. So just as when you go into a jail, we don't carry firearms into our interview rooms.
Thank you for the explanation, Chief.
Mayor Pro Tem
Yes, ma'am.
Hamrick.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments, observations here. We do have the county building across the road. There is the sheriff's department there and the courthouse. And those are separate buildings, although they are joined by an underground passageway. They are separate buildings, but to enter into the courthouse, you do have to pass through a metal detector. Once you've done that, then you have access really to the public areas within that building, if you want to call them that. In our police department, we have in the same building, we have both our civil court, our city court, and the police department itself. They're joined by a foyer that is a public area, but all of the other areas are entered into by permission only. They are secured areas. And really, in my mind, I think that understanding people's concerns about Second Amendment rights, the fact that we have a courthouse across the street where gun possession is prohibited within the courthouse, I think that by careful wording of this ordinance, for instance, by saying it is in Section 2A, it is unlawful for any person, including city employees, to carry a firearm or weapon on or about his person into the secure area of the police department, that I think achieves the chief's aims, which is that once a person enters the secure area, they are subject to search for weapons based on some cause. But that would not then apply to the public area when you first enter in.
What about the municipal court, though? Because that's an open door. There's no lock. You just walk in.
Is that true?
The court area would be considered a public area.
Is it considered, and there's not a locked door there? There's not there.
Well, it's locked when court's not in session, but when court is in session, that's a public area.
It's an open door, and so people can enter and leave at will.
In and out as you please.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tracy.
Just in response to Councilmember Hamrick's suggestion, I really prefer sticking with the existing wording on that. And I think we all have to be, and we're struggling with it here, we're all struggling with how we view the Second Amendment rights. We know, how many years now, it's been some number of years that courts in Colorado have been allowed to prohibit the carrying of weapons into a courthouse. And I would certainly never want to see that change. There's good reason for that. There's historical reasons that those kinds of regulations were brought about. And in the same way, I really want to support what the chief is saying here, that there are reasons that the chief and the sworn officers and the other staff at the police department need certain kinds of protections in order to do their work well. So I really want to support them in their recommendation that they have this. And again, I think what's proposed for other city buildings is reasonable, in my opinion, that we're not talking about taking away people's rights, going to Walmart or in your own home or in your car or many, many other circumstances. This only would apply to the carrying of weapons into city buildings, and that's Part 1, Section 1, and it applies, of course, in Section 2 to the police department. So I just want us to do whatever we can to protect our police department in the work that they have to do. And I mentioned just briefly earlier, I worked at a police department for a couple of years in another jurisdiction. I was working the front desk, working the phones, saw, people come in, and saw some pretty difficult situations play out in the lobby of a police department. So I really support what the chief is asking for here.
Councilmember Smith?
I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around is if somebody walked into the PD and they were asked if they had a weapon and they lied about that and they walked right into the municipal court building, their only penalty is a $50 fine for the violation and they'll be asked to leave. I just don't see this accomplishing what Chief's trying to accomplish, even Section 2. Thank you.
Chief, do you have a response?
Well, Madam Mayor, that's a fair point. There's not a great deal of sanction there, correct? But it does give us the ability to screen people more carefully, and if they are armed, to reject them from coming into the building.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes, of course.
Don't you think we could accomplish this with a totally separate ordinance? Or does it have to be under 2911-7?
It has to be subject to the $50 fine. That is the limitation the state legislature put on this type of restriction.
Corey, is there anything else you wanted to say in regards to that?
No, ma'am.
Any other discussion by council? Is there a motion? Councilmember Tracy.
I move that we approve ordinance number 1, series of 2022 on first reading.
Is there a second? There is no second, and so that motion fails. Is there a desire for a motion to amend ordinance number 1, series of 2022, deleting the first clause in section 1? Councilmember Schmischer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Personally, I think I'd like to see a little bit more research. I mean, we've heard about the Fremont County Court and the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. They have processes, I'm assuming they have underlying ordinances in place, and maybe you've already done that research, but I'd love to hear, like, what other options are there? I think Councilwoman Reed has asked this a couple of times, and just asking it again, I'd really like to make sure that we've done our homework, that we know what all of the options are so that we can make sure that we're making the best informed decision. Thanks.
Well, let me try to help if I could. The signs that were placed erroneously by a former employee of the city, the reason that they were posted erroneously is because prior to 2021, the only way that you could have prohibited weapons in the manner that that sign indicated was to have a metal detector. Absent the metal detector, prior to 2021, you could not put that sort of limitation in place. So that is why when council identified this issue and said, where did this authority come from? The answer was, there is no authority. And that was the error that was made previously. And so what the county is doing is consistent with the law. that says you can prohibit with a metal detector, and that's what they do. The 2021 legislative authorization gave municipalities the authority to expand their ability to prohibit weapons by taking away the requirement for a metal detector, but limiting the fine to $50. So that's what the law, that's the change in law. Certainly, the city could adopt an ordinance that prohibited concealed weapons and required, or prohibited weapons in, whether it be the court, the police department, both, and required a metal detector. And all of the attendant having folks to operate it and do exactly as the county does. That is another option. The city could still do that. That authority was not taken away by the 2021 legislation. So the city could do just as the county does if it so desired.
Councilmember Dennehy?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think it's important as we're saying this, as we're saying like the county does, the county's doing that down at the courthouses and that. They're not doing it within their public building there, right over here on Macon. That is still an open carrier, or however you want to say it. But this is, we're strictly talking about the police department and the courts there.
Correct.
So.
Correct. Has anyone reached out to Judge Allen and asked what his preferences and his opinions are about this ordinance as it would impact his court?
Chief, have you spoken with Judge Allen on the topic?
On this particular issue, no, sir.
So I think that I would reiterate Councilmember Schmischer's and Reed's request for maybe a little bit more research and questions and see what our options are to protect the interests of all parties, especially this, but definitely, I mean, Second Amendment, of course, is huge, but also the protection of our officers when conducting investigations is important as well, and also our courts that's under highly adversarial and highly emotional situations. Let's see what kind of options we may have, is my suggestion, but Mayor Pro Tem Rick, you have something?
Madam Mayor, I
Yeah.
have a motion.
Oh, okay.
And my motion is that we table this subject pending further input from Judge Allen and perhaps some more specifics about how this ordinance may affect both the police department and our civic court.
There's a motion to table this upon further investigation on our part and research.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Mandy Reed, I see you have some comments.
I was gonna ask what the motion to make this go away was. I wasn't sure how to do that, so I'll wait for the next round.
Well, right now we're tabling it to a future council meeting to have some further discussion, investigation, and probably more input from our public as well. There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
I just wanted to say that having heard everything here tonight and that if ordinance 1 had received a second, I was prepared to vote, be a no vote on that as it stands, and also on ordinance 2, but I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any more for discussion? Ryan?
Just clarification, we're tabling ordinance 1 pending a vote. Are there other modifications you want to see before we bring it back? Or bring it back as it is with the research?
We have to vote on tabling it, right? We're not for
Yeah,
sure
you
doing
still
it.
Yeah, we're still discussing the tabling. So Ryan's asking for more feedback for staff as we're tabling it and wanting to get more information. Give him some direction on the information that you want.
So what I'm hearing from council is research more pertaining to section 2 more so than section 1. So, I guess what I'm asking is, do you only want us to bring section 2 back, or are we bringing back all of ordinance 1 if we're to bring it back?
I personally think that.
Let's go down. Let's start at one end and go down.
I think that they're two separate issues and should be considered separately.
Okay.
If we're going to research the one for Chief Schick's office, I think that we should look at both of them when we're doing the research and see what the implications are. And since we've already had the signs up, if there's any legal implications to that they've already been up and no one's, have we had anyone who's ever questioned it or brought it to our attention?
Yes.
So there have been, okay. So, maybe we do need to do some research on the first part too. And, but the second part, if I had to vote myself tonight, I would vote on the second part, but not the first. Because I think it's clear that, how the people feel, not only who are here tonight, but a lot of people in the city. And I think what happens is that even if with that law in place, people aren't going to obey it. It's only $50. I'm with Brandon. I think people are, they're going to open carry wherever they want. And so I don't think that law, the first part is going to be a deterrent. But I think it's important, the second part is important, that we support Chief Schick and what he needs to do. And I think, he knows the industry and he knows what he needs. And so I'm pretty firmly behind that. But as long as we're researching it, we should look at both, both angles.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Thank you. I believe tabling section 1 completely. I don't feel that needs to even be addressed. I think our constituents in this county can speak on that highly. I think we can definitely look at section 2 and address it similar to what the county does as far as in our courtrooms and that, but the rest of it, I think, just needs to personally go away and leave as is.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to say I agree with that if we're talking about it. I'm not interested in having section 1 come back, but the information I'm looking for in section 2 is how would this ordinance affect the civic courtroom? How would it be enforced? Is there a way to now secure the courtroom so that entry can only be by permission through a locked door, a buzzer, or something like that? I'm not sure exactly because we have both functions basically under the same roof there. Although we do have a secure police department that entry is only through a buzzer that opens a door. So I would entertain some type of section 2 that gave the chief what he was looking for in his department. But I would like to know what the effect on the entire building would be. Thank you.
I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to see what Judge Allen says, and only pertaining to section 2.
I would like to see us not table but vote down section 1 and make it go away entirely. That would be my preference with section 2, but it doesn't sound like that's the overall appetite. So if that's the case, I would like us to spend some time exploring other options to be able to help our police department stay safe and be able to protect themselves and the department without diminishing the rights of law-abiding citizens. Because again, the ones that are breaking the law, this doesn't even matter. So I would like to see more. I'm not particularly concerned, I guess, about Judge Allen's input just because of it's the $50 piece, and he's mostly dealing with the actual situations. But I do think that it's an interesting thought that Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick has brought up about secure and unsecure locations. So I'd like to explore that more if that is something that Chief would like from us. But I do not want to table section 1. I want to have the opportunity to be able to make it go away entirely.
Well, I think if we based on our, well, go ahead, Emily. Emily, you say your thing.
Yeah, I'd be interested in any research, including what perhaps other municipalities have done, if they've done anything yet in regard to the new legislation from the state legislature. And so, anything that comes out that relates to either Section 1 or Section 2, I think would be useful. And I think we shouldn't rule out the idea of perhaps for the police building and municipal court building, we might need to just come up with an estimate of what it would take to have someone, actually staff metal detector type machinery. And, in other words, maybe too soon to rule that out. Maybe that ends up being the way to accomplish what the chief needs, what the department needs. We don't know yet what the municipal court may think they need or not need, but I'm very familiar with what other non-municipal courts are doing, and would not want to see that go away for them.
Do you have the direction that you need?
I do, thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, before we vote on the motion, perhaps I could amend my motion?
Sure.
So I amend my motion to, this is the amended motion. I move that we reject Section 1 of Ordinance 1, Series of 2022, and table Section 2 for further input.
So there's been an amendment on the motion. We will have to first vote on the amendment. Is that correct?
The maker of the motion did the
Oh.
amendment, so I believe it would be considered friendly if the person who seconded it also did.
I second that.
Okay, so we don't have to vote on the amendment because the
Correct.
makers of the motion have agreed to amend the motion.
That would be,
and-
that would be included in the motion,
Yeah.
because it goes with
So
Section 1.
what we are voting on now, with a motion and a second, is to delete the first clause as well as delete Section 1. However, table Section 2 upon further investigation and search for solutions for the CCPD investigations and arrests, and for municipal courts as a way that would be most amenable to adhere to their safety and protect Second Amendment rights. We're tabling that upon further investigation. So that is the motion. Are we clear on that? So you're voting yay if you wish. If you vote yes, that is to take out the first clause in Section 1 and table Section 2. We'll call a vote.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher.
Aye.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Stein.
Aye.
Councilmember Tracy.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
All right, the motion has been tabled. Thank you, council. Thank you for all that have been here to voice your opinion and be representatives of our community and our constituents, the citizens. We do, however, still have item 8C, that is introduction and first reading by title only of Ordinance 2, Series of 2022, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending Section 5.30.050 of the Canyon City Municipal Code relating to the prohibition of weapons as a condition of approval of a special event permit on city property. Now, this is a bit of a different beast. Corey, can you give us some enlightenment?
I don't know if I can give you some enlightenment, but I can, I can certainly explain. And first, I want to say that Commissioner Grantham is absolutely correct. There is already a prohibition related to someone with concealed carry and using alcohol. We were asked to draft this ordinance based on the fact that this would be a condition of a special event permit, so only the area where alcohol was served. So not an entire special event, but the area that is subject to the barriers for a special event permit where alcohol is served. This would prohibit weapons, concealed or open carry, in the area where alcohol was served on city property only. That is what this ordinance provides for.
So that's the consumption area.
The consumption area, exactly.
Let's also, Ryan, can you also enlighten us about the security that is required at these types of special events, like the Whitewater Festival? They have, or Cindy, you would probably know just as well, they have to have security. There's police officers and there's paid security at these.
It is recommended that there is security. Since Chief Schick has been with the department, we've had a higher level of presence from CCPD at these various events. But Cindy?
It's not required, it's only recommended. Okay. The insurance would require it. Thank you for that, Beth Ketchmar. So this ordinance only prohibits weapons within the area where alcohol is consumed,
And only if it's on city property.
and only if it's on city property. Otherwise, you can attend the Whitewater Festival and any other festival with your open carry. Still, that would happen within this ordinance.
Open or concealed?
Or concealed, absolutely. Okay.
However, yes, a lot of those festivals, especially in the park, they use the entire area as their consumption area where they fence off.
So I would like to hear more. Beth, can you tell us more about the insurance requirements?
I know that, that we had, the condition usually of the insurance policy is that it's better if we have paid security. And we always have had security guards at all the Whitewater festivals. And alcohol is allowed in the whole area, and that's why the whole area is fenced and posted for alcohol. But anybody can walk into a bar restaurant, like Pizza Madness, where I serve alcohol, and if they have an open carry gun, I will not serve them alcohol. That's a condition of my liquor liability, and this would be a condition of the liquor liability policy for a festival too. So I think you're already covered on all this. I don't think a separate ordinance is going to do anything that's not already in place.
So for you to have insurance for a festival, you would not be able to serve alcohol if there was open carry?
No. You're never allowed to serve alcohol to a person who is openly carrying. So if somebody's sitting at a table and they all want to have beer, but one of them has a gun on, I cannot serve him a beer. That's a law.
But if it's concealed carry, you could.
Well, yeah.
Because
That's
you wouldn't
always, yeah.
Councilmember Schmisher, thank you, Beth.
Beth just answered my question, actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Madam Mayor, I'm looking at this as almost going back to Section 1 again, and I think this is one that, as council, I mean, I work a lot of festivals, and I have never seen any problem with firearms, and personally, I think that this is already covered by our state, and I don't think the city needs to be touching this at all.
Councilmember Tracy.
I just have a question about the wording, Section 1F1, that first line. I'm not sure what that's supposed to say. Either there's a typo or something.
I think it's just regardless of any signs posted. So I think it's just missing a Y.
Okay.
Councilmember Reed.
I was just going to let everyone know that Beth Ketchmar is correct in regards to the insurance requirements, and this seems redundant for what we already have in the state statute in regards to consumption of alcohol and carrying of a firearm, and I agree with Councilman Dennehy that this should be considered the same as Section 2 in the prior ordinance, and it's unnecessary.
Or Section 1 in the prior ordinance?
Yeah, that.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Schmisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since we have Chief Schick with us, I would like to hear or ask for his thoughts on this particular ordinance. Thanks.
I don't disagree, Councilwoman, with what's been said. It's pretty much covered in state statute, and we haven't had a lot of problems or issues in that capacity. So I agree. I think we all can agree that alcohol and guns don't mix, but we we seem to have that covered in statute, and we haven't had issues in this capacity.
Council, oh, Schmisser, you already had yours, sorry. Well, at this point, we can either, if someone wishes, they can make a motion. If there's no motion made, this will die.
Mayor, I might recommend actually having the motion and having this go down. I think that would make a statement.
The statement that's necessary.
Well, it would, I think, tell the folks that came out tonight and tell the community the city's position on this, as opposed to just tabling it where another council could bring it back.
Councilmember Reed.
Madam Mayor and Council, I make a motion that ordinance number 1, series of 2022,
Ordinance 2.
ordinance 2, series of 2022, doesn't pass, is voted down. What's the proper terminology for that?
Just make a motion to move it, and then people will vote no to reject
Okay,
it.
I make a
That's the
motion
simplest
to
way.
move ordinance number 2, series of 2022.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Madam Mayor, before we vote, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Chief Chick for being here. I realize that you may not be feeling 100% tonight, and thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Chief. As a reminder.
Yes, ma'am.
When we call vote, that an aye vote would pass this ordinance, a nay vote will deny this ordinance. I'll call a vote.
Councilmember Dennehy.
Make sure I got this right. Nay?
Councilmember Reed.
Nay.
Councilmember Schmisser.
Nay.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Hard no.
Councilmember Stein.
Nay.
Councilmember Tracy.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
No.
This motion has died unanimously by the City Council. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.